Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. My guest for this episode of Harmonious World is Cat Bourne. What you're listening to is Rowan from her latest album, which is called Triquetra. I had a very interesting conversation with Cat in the lobby of King's Place in London, which is a great venue. I hope you enjoy listening in to our conversation. Well, hello, Katrina Bourne. Yes. Lovely to meet you.
And you. Please do call me Cat, because pretty much everyone does.
Okay, fine, Cat. Thank you. Triquetra. How do you pronounce it?
Triquetra.
Triquetra. Yeah. Okay. The album is out now?
Yes.
It's a lovely album. So you play harp, flute, and you sing?
A little bit of vocals as well, yeah. The harp sort of somewhat takes a bit of priority on this album. I enjoy both instruments equally, but when it comes to more of an improvised context, that's just slightly where I feel I can be more creative on that instrument. But yeah, I like to try and incorporate all my instruments on the album where I can.
Yeah, fantastic. Is it out now? When does it come out?
Yeah, so it's been out since the 11th of October. Out on Bandcamp, streaming platforms, CDs, and we're about 75% of the way through a release tour at the moment. So we've been all over. We were in Newcastle last month. We're in Birmingham next week. We had a gig in Twickenham yesterday. So lots of different places.
Yeah, fantastic. And is the band that you're touring with the same band that was on the album?
Mostly. So there's the odd occasion where we have a dep. James Oaston, the bassist on the album, for example, he's very busy. So we've had a couple of bass deps as well throughout the tour. But yeah, it's a very similar lineup.
Yeah, fantastic. So talk to me about the actual tracks, because they're all your compositions, which is fantastic. And they're all inspired by your Scottish heritage, is that right?
Yeah, so the central theme of the album is nostalgia. And I guess it's trying to reconcile this problem of wanting to think about brilliant memories in the past, perhaps in quite a bittersweet way, whilst also trying to stay present and look towards the future as well. So two of the tracks in particular are much more in that bittersweet, nostalgic mindset. And one of them, Rowan, was inspired by my grandparents' garden in Scotland. So thinking back to memories from that. And then another of the more bittersweet tracks on the album is Coronach, which is a Gaelic lament. And again, it's in its original form as a traditional piece of music, it was a lament for the dead, and so it's taking inspiration from that. There is a little bit of other elements other than my Scottish heritage. There's a reimagining of an Irish folk tune. I actually know it from the context of Céilís, Scottish Céilís, but it is an Irish folk tune that's been reimagined. And obviously there's all the jazz influences as well.
Yeah, and at this point in the podcast, I would really like to play a bit of the title track, yes. Triquetra.
Yes.
So tell me how you came about writing that one.
So a triquetra, if you've not seen one before, it's a sort of traditional Celtic knot symbol. It has various meanings in various different contexts. For me, it was thinking about past, present and future. And even with the album artwork, there's a beautiful painting by Helen Robertson, but then we also put a symbol on the front of a Triquetra symbol, a traditional symbol, but then it's in a very contemporary form. And so the title track was meant to be all about these three different elements. So it's divided into three, and it also kind of feels like it could go on forever.
Yeah, it does. And in fact, it's interesting because somebody was asking me only the other day about sort of the longest tracks that I've heard. And this does feel like, it doesn't feel long, but it does feel like you could keep going, extending it and taking it in sort of different directions. Is that what you do live? Yeah,
definitely. In fact, we spin it out a bit longer live. I was inspired by Roy Hargrove a little bit on this track, and I think you see that with a lot of his music as well, actually. Just going for something really cyclical, and it's the same with the other tracks, to be fair. Like, once we've got an idea, it's quite nice to spin it out and really explore it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the nice things about jazz, isn't it? That things can expand to however it feels right at the time, and that's why it's always nice to sort of hear an album and then go and see the performance live, where it's done in a slightly different way.
Definitely. And I think it's something which I do quite a few different genres, in the course of my music career. But what I particularly like with the more jazz-influenced music is that it's just so different every single time. Even if it's the same tune, same players, it can go to totally new directions.
Yeah, fantastic. So, on that note, please tell me a bit about your background. How did you get to where you are now?
It's funny because one of the reviews recently of the album, describing the album, said that just when you think you have it pinned down, it slips out of your grasp and it goes somewhere different. And I think the same could be said a little bit of me personally, because I grew up doing mainly classical and some folk music. I was very fortunate to have a musical family, and we would go and do family ceilidh gigs. And then I did, flute, harp, piano, all that classically. And then I started getting into more improvised genres other than folk, probably a lot more recently, actually. So my undergrad, I was pretty classical. And then I would say when I moved to London a couple of years ago, I started making friends with a lot of people, both from more contemporary classical, improvised sort of areas, and jazzes as well. And I guess it's just about friendships and sort of, exposing you to things you hadn't really come across before. So then, I started doing a lot of improvised contemporary classical, and going down the jazz route as well.
Yeah, one of the things I love about contemporary classical music is that improvisatory nature, and I know quite a lot of musicians who there's a freedom within the music. So.
Yeah, and I think for me, music is music, and I can give you, I can name multiple people that are excelling in many different areas. One of my good friends, Asha Parkinson, she's doing some really interesting things, fusing jazz, classical, and sort of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern music. Yeah. And there's so many other people like that are just bringing in lots of different influences in new ways, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and when did you discover Alice Coltrane? Because there's a definite Alice Coltrane thing going on there, isn't it?
It's so funny you mention that, because that is what prompted me to start doing jazz on the harp. I always was interested in it growing up. My aunt and my cousin are professional musicians and they're jazzers, and I'd sometimes go and sing with my cousin playing piano for fun growing up. And then I made friends with someone while studying on my postgrad in London. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, and he loved Alice Coltrane, and he wanted for his jazz performance platform at Trinity, where we were studying, he wanted to do some John Coltrane tunes, but with an Alice Coltrane influence to them. And he approached me, and to be honest, at the beginning, I actually thought he wanted me to play flute first of all, and then I realised that he wanted harp. And I thought, well, I've never done jazz on the harp before. I've done a bit on flute, but I don't know how I feel about this. And then I absolutely loved it. So that's what got me into it. So I'm not surprised if you can hear any influences of that.
Yeah. It's not like you've stolen her ideas or anything, but there's that sound, and I think the way they both, Alice and John Coltrane, they were very good at sitting back and letting other people play, and then coming in and doing their thing, and then working with other people. And it seems like that's the same with yours.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there are so many incredible jazz harpists that I really respect, and also jazz musicians, full stop, as well. But thinking about jazz harp specifically, obviously, Alice Coltrane had a huge impact on its perception as an instrument in that context. Dorothy Ashby really took it to new places. There's loads of contemporary harpists at the moment that are doing incredible things. Tara Minton, maybe an obvious example, who's really been a bit of a mentor for me with this project. Alina Bajinska, Brandy Younger. So there's so many people doing great things. Yeah,
it seems like the faff of lugging a harp around is worth it.
Yeah, it's funny. The number one thing that people say to me, particularly because up until recently I would take the harp on trains quite a lot, on public transport. And there's always some funny comments from passers-by, and the classic one is, "Bet you wish you played the flute." My guitarist keeps saying I should get a T-shirt which says, "Yes, I play the flute," for exactly those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. So, what does the future hold? What's coming up?
So we still got another day or so left on the tour. The final performance of this album release tour, it's taking place at Symphonia Smith Square in their Jazz in the Crypt series. I'm then going to spend a little bit of time writing some new music. I've already got some ideas bubbling away, but I'm very fond of the people that I am playing with at the moment, and I find those relationships very inspiring. So I imagine it will be along a similar lineup, possibly expanded. I do like my big ensembles as well. We're looking into arranging a tour of the Northeast at the moment for first half of next year. Should be fun, and hopefully at some point more recording.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because I think sometimes you need to, that tough second album, needs a bit of development, and I think playing live, especially because you will find other people that you want and suddenly go, oh yeah, I want to do some collabs with them. So
yeah, exactly, yeah. And I've obviously I am playing for other people's projects as well, so that keeps me busy in terms of there's obviously a couple of London Jazz Festival dates coming up, not with my own group, that's for a jazz pianist actually. And then my classical work, I've got a concerto performance, flute concerto performance of the Lieberman Flute Concerto, so I need to be doing some practice on that.
Yes.
So I try and, it sounds like you do this a little bit as well. I have a busy portfolio career of lots of different things.
Absolutely. Well, it makes it interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It keeps it, that you've always got something different going on, which I think is nice.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, there's a lot of, whilst it might seem, I guess, to someone that's not familiar with what I do, that they are very different things, I find a lot of connections between them. So in terms of programming and themes, I think nature and history are things that you can find in all my programs. I think in terms of actually getting to grips with a piece of music, actually there's a lot in common as well. I memorise all my music, classical or jazz, because I just think you don't really know it unless you've memorised it and analysed it. So there's a lot of things that I take from genre to genre. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I know a lot of people who don't memorise anything, and I always think you're losing half of it being from you, from your soul.
Exactly.
When it's completely in your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously for classical music where there is a little bit less. I mean, depending. To be fair, if it's Baroque, actually, I find a lot of parallels between Baroque music and some of the other things that I do. There is a little bit more flexibility, but obviously there's more kind of minutiae to memorise, I suppose, with that kind of thing. But yeah, in terms of being able to communicate with the audience, I prefer not to have a music stand in front of me and communicate with the other musicians as well on the stage.
Yeah, it definitely acts as a barrier, doesn't it? And I think some people use it as a barrier deliberately, actually, and I think, which is fine. If you need that, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think it is better when it's just you and then the audience and fellow musicians. So.
I think for me the really special bit about music is about the relationships, well, with the audience, with yourself, and with the other people on the stage. And so it just sort of helps facilitate that, really.
Yeah. Fantastic. Oh, well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really nice to have this conversation.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with Cat Bourne. Her harp is just beautiful. And this album, Triquetra, is really worth listening to. So do please follow the links in the show notes to check it out. And what you're listening to now is Sligachen Bridge. One of my key drivers for Harmonious World is to try and promote new and upcoming artists. So it was a great pleasure to introduce Cat to a new audience. Thanks for joining me once more, and wherever you are in the world, whenever you're listening to this, I do hope you're having a really peaceful time. And here's to everyone enjoying more of a harmonious world. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.